distortion on Instagram. Meta to blur Instagram messages containing nudity. That's coming up on Business Matters. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining me here today. I'm your host, Don Ma. Appreciate it. Let's start off with markets first. U.S. stocks today closed higher, and this was with tech-related momentum stocks leading the charge. Also, as well, fresh economic data rekindled hopes that inflation remains in a cooling trend, it seems like. So, the producer price index increased at its fastest pace in a year, but still came in softer than expected, and that helped markets. Richmond Fed President Thomas Barkin said that the central bank is not yet confident pricing pressures will continue to ease, so we'll have to keep a lookout on that. Investors, though, now switching their focus to first quarter earnings season with results from major banks coming tomorrow. That's including JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo. We'll have more for you on that tomorrow. Another key U.S. Inflation gauge increased last month. And what I'm talking about here is the Producer Price Index, or PPI. This is adding to concerns that high inflation and high interest rates will be sticking around potentially. Now, the Labor Department reported that its Producer Price Index increased last month at its fastest pace in a year. It rose 2.1% for the 12 months ending in March. Now, this number measures inflation at the wholesale level before it reaches customers. The PPI is a potential signal for prices consumers will end up paying. Now, the acceleration in prices producers pay for goods and services highlights their persistence of inflation. And the increase, of course, comes on the heels of the the consumer price index rather, jumping last month. And speaking of inflation, here's what else matters to you. Mortgage rates. Drifting slightly higher this week on the heels of disappointing March inflation numbers. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage averaged 6.88% in the week ending April 11th. Now, for your comparison, a year ago at this time, the rate was just over 6.25%. You know, although rates have stayed steady in recent weeks, higher than expected inflation numbers could move things in the wrong direction with those persistent price pressures. Economists aren't expecting mortgage rates to fall below 6% at any point this year, so something to keep in mind. And as well, staying just a bit longer on inflation here, car insurance costs skyrocketed last month compared to a year ago. So if you're wondering why your insurance is so expensive, well, we may just have some answers for you here. Here's industry expert Lauren Fix from Car Coach Reports. So Lauren, we got the consumer price index yesterday. It seems like car insurance up 22%. I'm wondering, what are you seeing?
Well, that's an average across the board. When you look at some consumers are seeing as much as 60%, some are getting their policy canceled. Very few are keeping the same rates. And the reason for this is car insurance is based on replacement value of your vehicle, the risks that you pose to the insurance company. Even if you're a safe driver, maybe you drive in unsafe areas, you typically drive during rush hour traffic, maybe there's been a lot of accidents in that vehicle, or you have an electric vehicle and it costs more to repair. Those are some of the factors that are causing insurance rates to increase. So you're saying 60% for some people. Why is that? That is way higher than the 22% from the CPI. Right, and the reason for that is, and this is something that I cover on my Car Coach Reports channel, is data collection. So for the last few years, data has been collected through the center screen on your car, and that information goes to the manufacturer. They use that for problems with the car, maybe fixing an idle or some sort of management of fuel. But what ended up happening is because electric cars have cost car companies so much money and they're taking a loss, they need to make up the difference. So how are they going to make extra money? They sell the data to insurance companies as well as to the government. So your car is actually snitching on you. But the problem is a computer doesn't know if you make an aggressive maneuver. Was there a squirrel in the road? Did someone jump out in front of you? Was there a pothole? All it knows is it has collected data from your steering input, your accelerator pedal, your location, that you made an aggressive move.
Now, does this data collection only works against you in the sense that it only raises the insurance cost for you? Does it ever lower the cost if, let's say, you are a very good driver?
Well, that's what they try to tell you. So they have these little dongles. You can either put it through an app on your phone or you can plug it in underneath your dash and then go to the onboard diagnostics. And that's supposed to help save you money. Every person that I've spoken with who has tried it has had their rates increase because they thought they're a pretty safe driver. They don't speed, they don't drive a lot of miles. One friend of mine actually tricked the system by driving his wife's car instead of driving his car, and he basically let his car sit in order to lower his insurance rates. So that's probably the only way that you could do that. Again, it's important that when you allow them access to your information, they can't tell whether you were avoiding a situation. All the computer knows is there was an aggressive driving maneuver, and that counts against you.
All right, final question. What can drivers do?
Well, the first thing you can do is don't sign up for any of those ways to save money by putting an app or something underneath your dash in order to save money. You can unsubscribe to some of the things that track your car. You can shut off some of the tracking on your phone. What we don't have yet is a way to disconnect it from your car. And I know there's a couple companies out there working on it. We have to find out if it's legal. So just don't go start and trying to unprogram your vehicle. Remember that when you agreed to purchasing your new car, you agreed to have them collect the data. Be a safe driver is the best thing you can do.
All right. Thank you very much today, Lauren Fix, Car Coach Reports.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you found those tips useful, but now I want to take a step back and look at the global economy and just see how it's doing. It appears analysts are reporting a negative outlook on global credit conditions this year. So this is based on a new survey by the International Association of Credit Portfolio Managers. Now, more participants than expected said they think corporate credit defaults will rise in the coming months, and that is not a good thing. But of course, this is dependent on the region. 51% expect to see a pickup in North America, and 57% are expecting defaults in Europe. So those surveyed overall expect credit spreads to widen. Okay, so I also have to mention this to you today, and I teased it at the beginning of the show today. Extortion crimes through social media direct messaging services have become an issue for many teens and preteens, so much so that Instagram had to come up with tools to fight against it. NTD's Sean Marshall has more information on this new age crime.
Instagram says it's testing out new features to combat sextortion and other image-related sex crimes. This is according to a blog post Thursday by the social media platform owned by Meta. As part of its campaign to make it tougher for criminals to contact teens. Rachel Goldberg was on hand to explain what sextortion is.
Sextortion is basically when somebody reaches out, usually via social media, to try to entice somebody else to send nude pictures, and then they send these nude pictures and there's blackmail after it. So I will expose these pictures if you don't either perform some kind of sexual act for me or send me money.
Instagram's new nudity protection feature blurs images detected as containing nudity and encourages people to think twice before sending nude images. This feature is designed to protect people from seeing unwanted nudity in their DMs, but also to protect them from scammers who may send nude images to trick people into sending their own images in return. Goldberg mentioned that there is sometimes a disconnect between children and parents when these cases appear.
These teens are coming to me first, if they're my client versus their parents, which is something that I think needs to be addressed. Parents need to maybe have this conversation with their children about what can happen and that they will not be in trouble if they come to them.
Recent high-profile cases include two Nigerian brothers who pleaded guilty to sexually extorting teen boys and young men in Michigan, including one who took his own life, and a Virginia sheriff's deputy who sexually extorted and kidnapped a 15-year-old girl. Attorneys general of 33 U.S. states, including California and New York, sued the company in October, saying it repeatedly misled the public about the dangers of its platforms. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Very serious issues here. Thank you very much, Sean. Okay, let's move on to West Virginia. The state has put major financial firms on a restricted list. So State Treasurer Riley Moore announced that he has added Citigroup, TD Bank, Northern Trust, and HSBC to the state's restricted financial institution list. Now, this is after determining that these institutions are engaged in boycotts of fossil fuel companies as defined under state law. And earlier, I actually spoke to the state treasurer for why he made the move. Let's take a look. All right, Treasurer Moore, thank you very much for your time today. So I just wanted your thoughts on this. You recently announced bans on 4 financial institutions from engaging in billions of dollars worth of state contracts. Inform us on the necessity of this action.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And what this is the restricted financial institution list, which is a law I put forward and we got passed in the state of West Virginia in 2022. And what necessitates this is the problem that we have is the conflict of interest. So I'll give you an example. So last year, from coal, gas, and oil in severance taxes here in West Virginia, we actually got $1 billion from severance taxes. The state of West Virginia, our state budget is $4.7 billion. So that is a considerable amount of money for us. So I can't hand dollars over to financial institutions that are boycotting those very industries through ESG that helped us generate that revenue. And so we see a conflict of interest there. And at the end of the day, look, they don't want to do business with our industries. Why should we do business with them?
And what would be the impacts on regular folks in West Virginia?
Well, look, we're an extraction industry state. As I mentioned there at the beginning, we generate a lot of money from coal, gas, and oil, but it's also a lot of jobs, and these are good paying jobs. The average coal miner here in West Virginia is making nearly $90,000 a year, which that is a very good salary here in West Virginia. Look, there are 2 people on the state flag of West Virginia, a farmer and a coal miner. That should tell you about all you need to know. It is very much a part of who we are.
And I want you to respond to what these banks have said. So some of them are saying that they do lend to fossil fuel-based energy companies and have exposure to this industry. What is your response to that? Set the record straight for us.
Well, they clearly have prohibitive language on, for example, thermal coal, which is the coal that generates electricity. But fossil fuels is all 3. It's coal, natural gas, oil. And for us, if you're not open to lending to all 3, then that is a problem for us.
All right. Thank you very much today, West Virginia State Treasurer Riley Moore. Pleasure having you on.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So in that interview, when I was referring to the headlines on coal, this is actually what I was talking about. New research shows that coal-fired power around the world grew 2% last year, and this is the highest annual increase since 2016. And this is according to a US-based company called Global Energy Monitor. Its survey found that the rise in coal was driven by new builds in China and a slowdown in closing plants. Though it's not just China. The research reports that coal-fired capacity grew outside of China for the first time in 5 years. And at the same time, even more coal capacity is in development. A majority of it is in the world's second largest economy. Now, taking a quick break, but when we come back, China seemingly retaliating to US export curbs with sanctions on American companies that Beijing alleges have engaged in illegal activity. And a Vietnam tycoon is sentenced to death in a $12 billion fraud case. What did she do? We'll have all the answers for you when we come back after the break. Don't go away.
Shen Yun Creations, the streaming platform from Shen Yun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
I started having lumbar
Today's Saturdays 6 and Sundays at 9 on NTD Television and other streaming platforms.
There's always a searching process for beauty. You know it when you see it.
All right, let's start with some quick headlines that's worth your attention today. O.J. Simpson has died of cancer at age 76. A post from Simpson's verified X account Thursday morning said he was surrounded by his grandchildren and children. The American football star and actor was acquitted in a 1995 trial of murdering his former wife. And Elon Musk headed to India. He announced on X that he will meet with Prime Minister Modi. No date was given. Tesla is expected to announce major investments in the country soon. And as well, Apple has updated its language to warn users after attackers tried to remotely compromise the iPhone. The company's website no longer says state-sponsored attackers. Now it says mercenary spyware attacks. Okay, so the head of Amazon also is saying that he is committed to cost cutting as the company's doubled down on new investments. Now, one of those new investments is artificial intelligence. The CEO said that during his annual shareholder letter, he said this. He believes that generative AI could become a pillar for Amazon. The CEO took charge of Amazon after founder Jeff Bezos stepped down in 2021. Under him, Amazon launched its largest layoff company in history. China sanctioning 2 U.S. defense companies today over what it called for their support of arms sales to Taiwan. The Chinese Communist Party sees Taiwan as part of its own territory. Despite having never ruled the island, the U.S. doesn't have formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan, but it does sell weapons to the island so it can defend itself. So as for the 2 American firms sanctioned by China, they make tanks and drones, and their assets in China would be frozen, and their management wouldn't be able to enter China. And a few more China stories for you today. Double blow for China's second biggest developer, seems like. Vanke has hit new lows for its Shenzhen-listed stock and its Hong Kong-listed stock. Its dollar bonds have also fallen, and this comes after S&P stripped its investment grade status down to junk territory. All the other major credit rating firms had already declared Vanke's credit as non-investment grade. And the developer has also confirmed that one of its general managers, Xiao Jin, is under investigation. In a statement, Vanke said Xiao is cooperating and his role has been taken over by another executive. It also said the company is operating normally. Now, a Vietnamese woman who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the country's richest real estate developer was sentenced to death for fraud. 67-year-old Trong My Lan was convicted of stealing billions in loans from a Vietnamese bank she helped to create. Trong My Lan was convicted of taking out $44 billion in loans from the Saigon Commercial Bank. 83 co-conspirators, including her husband and niece, were also found guilty and received sentences ranging from 3 years to 20 years in prison. And this high-profile case is a rarity for the communist country, by the way. And she is one of the very few women in Vietnam to be sentenced to death, actually, for a white-collar crime. Now let's talk about forever chemicals. The EPA's new rules about these dangerous substances are raising eyebrows, it looks like. Now, forever chemicals, also known as PFAS, last pretty much forever. For decades, industry has been using them in many products. For example, weatherproof clothing, frying pans, dental floss, makeup. Chemistry professor Will Ditchell tells us these chemicals have entered the environment.
We have polluted the world over with these compounds to varying degrees. We're finding negative health effects as we're exposed to these compounds, things like cancer, complications in childbirth and pregnancy, reduced response to vaccines, high cholesterol, and many others.
99% of Americans have PFAS in their blood, according to research. The new EPA rule significantly lowers permissible PFAS levels in America's drinking water. So I have a chart for you showing the different levels for different types of PFAS. For 2 types on this chart, 4.0 parts per trillion. For 3 other types, 10 parts per trillion. And this means only 10 drops of PFAS in 20 Olympic swimming pools are allowed. Attorney John Gardella specializes in PFAS issues and represents numerous companies who use PFAS. He believes the EPA's move is political.
The levels are extremely low, and the EPA did this deliberately. It set the levels so low because essentially that's the limits of the technology that exists today. The greatest impact will be on the water utilities who are providing drinking water. They will be the ones who have to comply with this rule. And essentially, in order to do it, very expensive technology will have to be installed to filter out the PFAS to the levels that the EPA is requiring. And, there's also the issue of having to do lab testing. And these things are not, one step and it gets fixed. You have to continue monitoring.
Gardella says the EPA previously recommended 70 parts per trillion. And of course, this is far higher than 4. He believes the move intentionally comes ahead of the election, so politicians have it on the books. The EPA estimates that compliance will cost $1.5 billion annually. Gardella says the cost may be even higher than that as utilities scramble for money to comply with them. These are 2 sources the money may come from.
Increasing costs to users of drinking water, like you and I, everyday users. I don't think that's the most realistic choice because it's very unpopular. And many of my clients are asking, are concerned that the water utilities might turn around and file lawsuits against companies that have discharged water from their industrial or manufacturing process into streams that ultimately went into drinking water.
Gardella represents dozens of firms in various industries, such as carpeting, electronics, paper, recycling, and waste management. He says the new rule is an enormous change and will likely be challenged in the courts. And that's all the time we have today and all the stories for that fact. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll have more stories for you tomorrow. So to come back tomorrow. If you have any feedback for the show, feel free to let me know. Don't forget, business matters. Goodbye.